Step into the Oracle Parlor, a podcast where those interested in witchcraft, psychic abilities, ghosts, and all things paranormal come to sip and spill the magical tea. This parlor is a space to grow by maintaining our curiosity over fear when it comes to the spooky and the paranormal. I'm your host, Jenny, otherwise known as Fantasma Witch. I'm a previous visual storytelling artist from animation, now full-time psychic witch, who is getting her MA in psychology to become a licensed therapist. Every other episode, I will share my paranormal experiences, different witchy experiences on a variety of topics, while other episodes, I will be talking with witchy guests of all backgrounds, from writers to artists to well-known social media witches, so we can learn about their practices and how they grew into their personal power. So get cozy and grab your tea. It's time to get mystical. Hello, my mystical friends. Welcome back to the Oracle Parlor podcast. If you are watching, you may see a very familiar face in the parlor today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, I'm Madame Pamita. My pronouns are she, her. I would call myself a folk magic, spiritualist, animist, new thought witch. I mean, a little bit of everything. And I'm a Ukrainian-American. I practice folk magic and Ukrainian folk magic. I am a writer, an author, a candle maker, a tarot reader, a spellcaster. I do all kinds of services work. And you can find me at my website, Parlour of Wonders, another parlor, Parlour of Wonders.com. Parlour, though. And my handles on all my social media are all Madame Pamita, Madamepamita, no spaces, no numbers, no underscores, no anything, just the Madame Pamita. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, you have such a wide array of things that you are known for in the witchy community from, like you were saying, your writing, the books that you've created, your candles, and before we get too much into your business, I just have to say, I love the name. Like, I mean, my podcast is the Oracle Parlor. I love that idea of evoking kind of these classic ideas of divination parlors and psychics and witchy things. And Madame Pamita has that same vibe of that, like, very old school classic, whimsical, mystical feeling. And so I'm curious, is there a story behind the name? How did you conjure that?
There is a story behind the name. So, my given name is Pamela.
Mhm.
And back in the 90s, I was in an all-girl band and called the Neptunas. We still quasi exist. I mean, we haven't played since before COVID, but so in my band, we just like the Ramones were like Dee Dee Ramone and Joey Ramone and Johnny Ramone, right? Um,
Yeah.
we all had names and we took our first names and added Ita to them. So there's Leslita, Laura Bethita, and Pamita Neptuna. That was our band names. So,
Amazing.
fast forward a couple of years, and then I got very interested in old time music from the 20s and 30s, American music, blues, jazz, hokum, all kinds of cool, fun music. And so I wanted to do this little like vaudeville show. And I said, well, what can I do? I go, well, I'm a tarot reader. I could bring tarot into it. And I could do like a thing where the audience members pick a card and then we play a song that's associated with that card.
How
So
cool.
you can find if you dig deep enough. I mean, I've got lots of videos of me teaching on YouTube, but if you dig deep enough, you'll find videos of me playing and singing and doing these things, right? So I had this little vaudeville act. And so uh, half of LA knew me as Pamita anyway. I mean, the people that knew me, half the people that knew me as Pamita because they knew me through the band. So I said, well, I'll be Madame Pamita. So Madame Pamita became my name for this act. then people started asking me, hey, will you do a tarot reading for me? Will you come do tarot readings at my party, this
Mm.
and that? So the name just kind of followed me out of the music part of it into my
Oh my
regular
gosh.
life. And then when I wrote my first book, I said to my editor, Judica Illis, who's amazing, I love her so much.
Yes.
She said, I go, should I just go by my real name or should I? She's like, no, Madame Pamita is you. You need to do that. I said, okay. So it has stuck with me and I embrace it. I love it. I feel like it's like that, like you said, like that old time
Yes.
mystical fortune teller name. I don't shy away from calling myself a fortune teller. I love all that. That the vintage vibe of that too. I'm really much a person
Yes.
of vintage stuff. So that's yeah, that's the story behind my name.
What an amazing journey to start with. Oh, yes, it was, part of a band. And then you ended up bringing it into another aspect of music that also blended tarot. And now it is you. It is, like I said, you are known in the witchy community. It's like, oh, do you know Madame Pamita? And everybody's like, well, yeah, of course. Like, it's just, it has you know, this radiance to it in a way that I feel is very unique and very much like you. And like you're saying, it has that kind of like classic vintage vibe. And that is very apparent on your website as well. All of it has that really cool old school vintage vibe. And, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. For anyone who doesn't know, you have a fantastic shop that offers so many services, so many classes, amazing books that have all different varieties that you cover so many different topics. But I'd like to know a little bit about your journey. You kind of talked about it with music, but it sounds like you were already doing tarot even at that point in time. So, how did you get into this work? And at what point did you kind of reclaim that title of witch? Even though I know the title of Madame Pamita had kind of like taken you and adopted you.
Well, I grew up in a magical household. So what my mom was older when she had me. She was in her 40s when she had me. And so she really, even though she was Catholic, she didn't get into this kind of like very American, very 80s thing of like, oh, satanic panic. Oh, do you have to work? A Ouija board is going to open up a portal to demons and blah, 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 blah. She really was of that older generation. Now, added to that, she was Ukrainian and born here, but her parents were from Ukraine. And so in Slavic culture, they have what's called double faith. You're going to church and you do all that, but you also practice your folk magic practices, right? And it's not exclusive to Slavic magic. We see this a lot in other indigenous folk magic practices where
Yes.
people will go to church, but they'll also do things Italian magic, for example, or
Yeah.
I think of Mexican magic and all kinds of
Yep.
people do both, right? Covering all their bases, maybe.
Hmm.
So we grew up doing magical things, but and I say like my first candle magic was in Catholic church. You light a candle, you make a wish, you put an
Yep.
intention,
Yep.
right? It might be, you're asking a saint to intercede for you or
Yeah.
your whatever, but you're still doing candle magic, right? So um so I grew up in this house where magic wasn't forbidden. It was just
Mm.
under this umbrella of Catholicism.
Mm.
So my mother bought me my first tarot deck when I was 10 years old. We went into Lori Cabot's shop in Salem, Massachusetts, and she said, pick out a souvenir. And I picked out a little teeny tiny miniature Rider Waite deck, which I can guarantee you in 1974 was probably the first tarot deck I'd ever seen, let
Mm.
alone owned, because it wasn't like,
Yeah.
ubiquitous. And I, at that age, wouldn't have had the wherewithal to go to a, esoteric shop. So she bought me my first tarot deck. We had a Ouija board in the house. She and I would practice ESP, or we would do these little wishing spells. So it was very like age appropriate, but
Hmm.
it was never forbidden. It was never off limits or evil or bad or wrong.
How
So
cool.
I was very, very grateful for that. Did I identify as a witch? I think when I was 10, I read that if you wanted to be a witch, you would circle around 3 times under the full moon, and then you would become a witch. So I was out there circling out in the full under the full moon
You're
in the
like, let's
backyard.
go. Yeah.
Um, I think a big moment for me, there's been many moments, we were big library users, goers, and so I would find anything I could find that was any way adjacent to the metaphysical, which would in the 70s would have been a lot of like Bigfoot and ghosts and
Yes.
things like that, pyramid power, I don't know,
Oh
whatever.
my gosh, yeah.
EST. So, so I was getting all of that sort of esoteric information about other worldly things. But when I was 13, I went to junior high. It was junior high, not middle school back then. And in the library, they had Sybil Leek's Diary of a Witch in my school library. So I
What?
was, damn. And every day that I think about, every time I remember that, I always think, bless that librarian there that put that book in there so that I could find it. And, this little witch who didn't have access to things could find it. So
Yeah.
I really came to it from this place of it was very normal and natural. And this idea that came about in the 80s and then bleeding into the 90s that witches are evil, Satan worshipers, this and that was never really part of my understanding of what it meant. To me, it meant being connected to forces of nature and being able to coalesce energy to work magic. And really it meant those things, which is now I can see it probably being defined as hedge witchery more than anything else. I went, we had a beautiful big community of Wiccans. So in my 20s, I got involved with feminist Wicca here in Los Angeles with a huge coven of feminist women getting together. I then sort of drifted from Wicca into my own path of like a solitary practitioner, just really, looking at different things, including things like New Thought, Law of Attraction, which I feel works so beautifully well when we bring magic and we emphasize the thought as the origin of our manifestations and we bring in our magical tools. I find that to be the sweet spot for me. And so I share that with other people as well. But I'm always an eternal student, learner, explorer. And people will say to me like, well, how do I get started in my witchcraft practice? I'm just beginning. Where do I begin?
Yeah.
I say it's like a beautiful big map, a big land. You can land anywhere on that map, whatever interests you, because from there you will go explore from there. It doesn't matter if where you start is candle magic or tarot or runes or sigils or whatever. You will start where you start, and from there you're going to explore and learn. And it's not a path, it's a map. It's a beautiful.
Yes, exactly. No, I love that so much because I remember when I was like, okay, I'm reclaiming the title of witch. There's so many different ways to go. And I think like what you're saying, telling people, essentially like, see where the wind takes you. Literally follow your heart, follow your interests. What interests you, what interests you now, what interested you as a kid? Because even that like can play into things that may interest you now. Like I was one of those kids that used to pretend that I would be in the backyard with like a bucket of mud and sticks and rocks. And I'd be like, this is my potion. These are my herbs. And then I got into herbalism as an adult. Like, it's just one of those things where it can come from any inspiration and can really take you anywhere. So I really love and appreciate that kind of perspective of like, just see where you start and just allow it to kind of take you where it wants to go. Because it can absolutely take you in some pretty unexpected places that may end up being something that you weren't anticipating to be something you might be interested in. So I love that. I also love that you were kind of talking about, as a kid and being Catholic, because I was also raised Catholic, and that, we were we were definitely doing candle magic, in the room with the candles, and you pray to the saint, and you're asking for, and then of course as a kid when they say, "Oh, ask the saint for help," I'm a kid going, "Okay, I need help getting a puppy." As a kid, I was trying to manifest that puppy with candle work in the church. So, but it's funny that never really clicked with me until you had said it. Like, yeah, actually, that very much was the case. And I love that, for you, it was very much like just one and the same. It was, yeah, of course, this is just a natural part of it. Because, even though I had a similar upbringing where it was like, yeah, my mom got me my first deck, we had a Ouija board, there was still this part within the family where I feel like that satanic panic from the 80s carried over into the 90s when I was a kid. And so there was this belief of like being a witch was evil,
Mhm.
like calling yourself a witch was really bad and negative and had to do with Satan. And then, of course, being raised Catholic, little Catholic girl me was like, oh no, I don't want to be evil. I don't want to,
Yeah.
But as an adult, I found out when I started getting into my cultural heritage and connecting with ancestors that, as you were saying, there are a lot of practices around the world that incorporate saints and Catholicism with old folk traditions. And I had found out that my abuelita, my grandma, who her mother, who had lived in Mexico, used to perform limpias, cleansings for
Yeah.
people. But this is from an extremely Christian family that like was
100%.
very
Yeah.
strict. Yeah. And so it's just really funny to think, so many cultures have this idea of like they're two separate things, but they're not because they're one and the same. So they don't see it as witchcraft. It's just, yeah, this is just what we do. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear that you were actually raised with that and seeing that and being like, yeah, there's no difference. Because my grandma had the same reaction, and I was, adult me having seen them all my life as two separate things was just like mind blown.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so much beautiful because, living in Los Angeles, Mexican culture is huge here. I mean, this is
Hmm.
indigenous. I mean, if you really would go back, it's the indigenous people that
Yes.
lived here and the land that we live on and the land that we stand. And and so, having grown up in Los Angeles, Spanish was my first, second, well, it's my second language. I've got third, fourth, and fifth now, but it was my second
Amazing.
language and Mexican culture. And then later, as we got into the 90s, Central American culture, but really we are so infused with Mexican culture here.
Yes.
And knowing about like the botanicas and limpias and curanderismo and all of that, it's like all around us. So
Yes.
it's not my culture. I'm not Mexican, but I'm a super big appreciator of Mexican culture and Chicano culture as how it's evolved in the people that live that come and live here and grow up here too, but they still have those roots in Mexico, I
Yeah.
love Mexico. I'm going to Mexico, in fact, for Dia de los Muertos this year, which is
Ah,
something I've like has been on my bucket list to
it's
do.
on my bucket list.
So I'm very, very excited to be going this year and going to be spending time with some friends. And there's a beautiful witchcraft school in the FA in Mexico City that is called Salem Witch. And then they have Salem Witch Coffee Shop. They have a coffee shop and then they have a school. I'm not sure. I don't remember what the school is called, but the coffee shop that it is the hub is in Mexico City. And I might be teaching a class down there. But I'm going to
What?
be teaching with a translator because my Spanish is good enough to get around and have a light conversation, but not enough to like talk about deep esoteric things
Yeah.
authority. So yeah, but
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So this connection between folk magic that
Mhm.
has existed. I mean, this is the beautiful thing about folk magic. It is a survivor because as
Yes.
much as like we're going back to the times for certain going back to the times before colonialism,
Yep.
right? And going back to, and that is, not only, you know, uh, colonialism of Europeans, but colonialism of a religion being
Hmm.
imposed on you and going back to those older things. They might be dressed up in a different outfit. We might see it in a different way.
Yep.
But, or there might be a different interpretation of it. But if you just scratch the surface, you'll see that ancient,
Exactly.
pre-colonialism truth there. And same thing, there's a great parallel in Ukraine with a lot of places that have had colonialism, because for Ukraine,
Mhm.
it was constantly being invaded and controlled, either in very long time ago by Poland and Lithuania, but then in the last several hundred years by Russia, where they're claiming, this is ours and this is ours, but it's not. It's the people of that land. It's not yours to say this was our great culture. It's not your culture, So
Mhm. Mhm.
we see that happening, of course, and are acutely aware of that. But it also happens even in Europe, that we see these superpowers take over. And of course, in America, it's the worst, But
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I feel a great kinship and to Mexican culture, love Mexican culture, and as a great appreciator of Mexican magic as well. So
Yeah, it was just so funny hearing you talking about your upbringing and being like, "Oh, that sounds very similar to like the things I was discovering about my family on the Mexican side of things." So I was just like, it's interesting how it has that kind of like you're saying you scratch the surface and then there it is, you know.
yeah.
And that's something I actually wanted to talk to you about is, I really admire how deeply you are connected to those ancestral roots and how you bring that forward with not just your practice, but with, you know, how you use your voice for the Ukrainian people, how you use your magic for the Ukrainian people. And so I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that and maybe some of your favorite practices that you either learned later or even when you were a kid that you're like, oh, this is where this originates from, sort of like your expedition into that.
Well, it's really interesting because, I think, oh my gosh, when we talk about ancestors, I'm going to go back to Mexico again for just a second.
Yes.
Well, the Disneyfied version of Mexico, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because when people, were always like weirded out, I think a lot of people would be weirded out by connecting to dead spirits. Are you doing a seance? What are you doing?
Hmm.
And finally when the movie Coco came out, I said to
Hmm.
everybody, I go watch that movie. First
Yeah,
of all,
yeah.
bring some Kleenex with you because you're gonna
Oh
cry.
my God. I cry every time.
Same, same. But I go, that, because we have this beautiful art that was created, and I really do think that is a beautiful artistic movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yes, it is made, for mass consumption, but it
Hmm.
has such a deep, heart-touching, resonant message in there, which is that the family connections never
Yeah.
die. Oh my gosh, now I'm gonna get teary. Think about the grandma. Oh my gosh, and
Hmm.
all of that, how much she's a part of that story. But the connection between the generations is so beautiful, right? And so for Ukrainian people, the ancestors are in almost every part of magic, right? So I was starting to it's the wildest ride. I had this, because there is nothing out there about Slavic magic, let alone Ukrainian magic. It was
Yeah.
for me to connect to it in any deep, let's say, scholarly way of reading books about it, because books don't exist, right? They didn't exist. And so but yet I had this longing and this yearning, because my mother would tell me stories, but I knew I didn't have the complete information. I knew there was more to it. So for example, she said to me, your grandmothers, who died before I was born, your grandmother used to do this thing. She'd hold a bowl of water over someone's head and she'd pour wax into it. And then it was kind of like a fortune telling, but it was also to help the person. It was more than just a fortune. And that is the bare bones I had from my mother.
Oh, wow.
So when there were no books, nothing I could find about it at all.
Hmm.
And then as the internet started coming up, every once in a while I'd get this little like tap on my shoulder. You need to check it out. Like, go find this, right? Go find something. And I'd come up empty handed. The best I could find was like that there's a tradition on St. Andrew's Eve of doing fortune telling to see who your husband's going to be. And you pour wax through a key, the hole of a skeleton key, into the water. And then you hold up the shape and then you look at the shape, and that will tell you what your your future husband's profession is going to be, or a little bit about him, right?
Oh, how
And
cool.
I'm like, it's close, but it's not quite.
Yeah.
What my mother was
Yeah.
telling me was not about finding a husband, and there was a
Hmm.
key. And I'm still very, it still didn't click, like the puzzle pieces didn't quite.
Yeah.
Then the synchronicities of, I made a wonderful Ukrainian Canadian friend who's also a witch. She has a shop called thewitchery.ca.
Mm.
Katie Carpets, I love her. She's amazing. And so she was also like digging up and finding stuff about Slavic magic and Ukrainian magic while I was trying to dig and find. And she found this woman that wrote this doctoral thesis on Vili Visk, which is this wax pouring. And so there was this little booklet that was this woman's doctoral thesis
Oh, wow.
that had the information and was exactly what my mother was describing my grandmother doing. And then it was like, oh my gosh, this is a healing ritual. It is a cleansing ritual. You're doing the wax reading to see what the source of the trauma is and to heal
Mhm.
the trauma. It's the depth that I needed. So when I found that, it was like finding in the story of Aladdin when he goes into the cave of wonders and there's all these jewels there. I said, oh,
Yeah.
I found a link. And so then I said, well, if I can, and then that is when my grandmother and Baba Yaga came through and like, you need to write this book. And I'm like, okay, I'll write
Oh,
this.
how cool.
And then I was like, great. I was like so delusional. I'm like, this is going to be easy. I'm going to find so much stuff. And no, it was not easy at all. And there were many
Mm.
tears that were shed trying to find information, but I did find information. I had to learn to read Cyrillic. I had to go down crazy rabbit holes that ended up with nothing and crazy rabbit holes that ended up with a whole bunch of stuff. But this is how that book came together, was so much like spirit driven. The book came out almost like to the month that the invasion happened in Ukraine. So when Ukraine
Oh.
news, if you know about book production, it's
Hmm.
2+ years. There was nothing on my radar that I'll
Mm.
get out a book about Ukraine. It was all the spirits. It was all the
Yeah.
spirits pushing me to do this. And
Yeah.
so I think of this like when we start to work with spirits, amazing things can happen because um, they have a bigger view of things. So we
Yeah.
just have to like collaborate with our spirits, our ancestor spirits, and they're going to open the doors for us. They're going to push us to do more. They're going to do
Hmm.
everything. And so I'm like, okay, I just go along for the ride. I'm like, yeah, I want
Yeah.
this, but I'm like going to let you lead. And it ends up being amazing every single time. So
That's amazing.
yeah, so that's
That's a
the,
lot of trust too. That's putting a lot of trust in like, okay, like, like you said, a lot of tears shed, but you still were like, I'm still doing it. I'm still going for it. I'm still exploring. I'm still figuring that out.
I'm not a quitter mostly. I'm a quitter in some things. but
But not
I'm
this
not a
thing.
I'm not a quitter when it comes to magic, and I'm not a quitter when
Yes.
it comes to creativity, and those two things together will keep me going. So yeah.
Oh, it's wonderful. And it's so cool hearing your story of like that you had heard this story of a technique of a folk practice and that you really went on an adventure to find the answer and to find that hidden secret. It's funny because like for me, I had a reverse thing very similar where I started, really um after having a really wild connection with one of my ancestors in a meditation where I was given information I had no idea existed and I Googled later and I was like, wow, this is really something. I'm going to start connecting to that ancestral heritage and those roots that I was learning curanderismo from a teacher, and I was learning all about the different limpias and like a huevo con or a limpia con huevo. And so I didn't know how to tell my abuelita about it because I was like, okay, this is like very Christian woman who like I didn't know how she was going to take like folk magic practices because she had never talked about it. And then when I told her, yeah, I learned about this thing where, in Mexico, you cleanse with an egg. And she's like, oh, yeah, my mommy did that. And I was like, wait, what? And that's when I learned that my great grandma was doing cleansings for people in town, and people would come to her and get herbs and all different sort of things. And even my grandma was like, I don't know what these were, but she told me just the smallest pieces that from my own education and readings and learning from other curanderas, that I was like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know what that practice is.
Oh
But
my
it's
gosh.
but yours was just like, I have to go and dig so deep because that information wasn't even there for you, which is so much work. But I'm sure it was extremely gratifying to feel that connection and know, like, I did this, and that you also, not only were you doing it for you and your family connection, but you, like you said, you released it at a time where, it was needed. And for people out here who are also, like, a lot of Americans are trying to connect with, like, their ancestral roots and understand that culture that they came from. And so you putting this book out at that time for people who are also Ukrainian American to have that opportunity to connect in, I'm sure it was extremely valuable to people who were needing that.
My gosh, it's been amazing. I had of course, as any creator will tell you, you get these little inner critic that will say things,
Mm.
to kind of like stop
Hmm.
you or overprotect you, maybe. Um, and I was like, well, gosh, are Ukrainian people going to be, as me being a diaspora Ukrainian, that I'm not
Mm.
from the
Mm.
homeland, that
Yeah.
my grandparents had to leave and so on, are they going to be like, hey lady, you didn't grow up here, how do you know these things?
Yeah.
But that was a doubt that went through my head. But it was in fact quite the opposite, because um because only in 2014 did Ukraine really declare its independence from Russia, and is still of course in that process.
Yeah.
um People were not, either the information was destroyed or the information was stolen and taken.
Mm.
And so the diaspora people who left were actually able to keep some of the traditions alive when they were
Ah.
not allowed during Soviet times. So,
Mm.
so what Ukrainian people feel is, number one, they feel a great kinship with Ukrainians all over the world, because so many have had to leave, and everybody
Mm.
knows somebody that has left, right? This is not an uncommon.
Yeah.
And at the same time feel that kinship with the people that have left, that they're not being abandoned, or that there's disrespect by leaving. So
Yeah.
that I wrote this book in English, it got translated into Ukrainian
Oh my
by
gosh.
somebody that just did it, not published, because the book publishers are not in a place
Yeah.
with the war going on that they can publish anything. And that book has been passed, this bootleg version has been
Oh my gosh.
passed around. I'm like, I'm fine with it, because to me,
Yeah,
it's a gift back to the, what I mean,
that's
to
lovely.
my relatives,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a gift back. But I would hope that one day it will be published officially. But in this
Yeah.
meantime, this underground bootleg version is floating around, and I have no problem with that. But everybody has said, without exception, how grateful they are that it's like that there's documentation of these
Yeah.
things, that that there that culture is being preserved, when cultures,
Yeah.
they're trying to destroy culture
Destroy
right
it.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all it takes is one person who's extremely passionate and dedicated and puts in that hard work to go do the research, go find as far back as they can possibly reach in time and in history to preserve that. And it sounds like you were able to do that, even if it's, not able to be published in other languages officially, but the
Yeah.
fact that you were still able to preserve that in some way is absolutely amazing, and just, I feel like, has this really positive ripple effect.
Yeah.
So that's
When
really
you're
beautiful.
when you're told, I mean, they have hundreds of years of being told to be ashamed of
Yeah.
being Ukrainian, that that's second rate to Russia, that this, to have, of course, to have people have pride about
Yeah.
heritage, have pride about traditions. feels good for everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like always great to see,
Yeah. I mean, the greatest resistance is joy and pride in who you are and your roots and your, yes.
100%. I
Yes.
mean, it's what we're seeing, Los Angeles, you're here.
Yep.
When we're recording this, we're still in the middle of this atrocious
Yeah.
kidnappings and things that are going on. And to see, and people like, well, why are people waving the Mexican flag? Because it's just like the pride flag. If you're told that what you're second rate class or you're not worthy, to
Hmm.
do that is such a radical act to say, like, no,
Yeah.
I am American, but I'm proud of my Mexican
I
heritage.
exist. I'm here. You
Yeah.
cannot erase this.
Yeah, and
Yes.
Mexican culture and Mexican citizen, these are not second class things at all.
Yes.
In fact, as Europeans, you should be grateful to the people who
Yeah.
lived on the land before you, right?
Hmm.
Really, in respect and gratitude. So yeah. So I love the resistance that's coming out of California right now.
Yes.
A lot,
No,
a lot of it.
same.
It's good.
Yes,
It's good.
absolutely. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about your book that we've been discussing. For many who practice witchcraft across many cultures, there's the archetype of the crone. This elder wise woman is very, very popular and has gotten even more popular over the last, I don't know, like since the 90s, especially with Mother Maiden Crone becoming very popular. I feel like, if you've seen Agatha all along, that's only going to make it even more
Yeah.
popular. But you've written a few books now, and the one that we've been talking about for anyone who's unaware is Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, Slavic Magic from the Witch of the Woods. So I don't know much about Baba Yaga, but it appears that she is one of those crone archetypes who exists within the liminal space as someone to be respected as well as feared. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on Baba Yaga, how you work with her, the aspects of that archetype that resonate with you in your practice.
Yeah. Well, I really, I have always known about Baba Yaga because, she shows up in Slavic fairy tales. She's never the main character. She's always kind of like shows up for a minute and then, she's out.
And dips, yeah.
Dips in. But we have to remember that folk tales and fairy tales are ways of transmitting information when information is forbidden.
Hmm.
We look at a culture's folk tales and fairy tales, you can learn so much about the belief systems, the magic, everything about that culture before an oppressive regime comes in. So, she exists in Russia for sure, but she
Hmm.
also exists in all the Slavic countries. It isn't simply a Russian thing. The
Yeah.
first guy to write and write down these folk tales that were oral tradition was a guy, Alexander Afanasyev, who was Russian. He saw what the Grimm brothers Grimm were doing, recording
Mm.
tales, and he's like, "Oh, well, I can go around collecting tales." So he did collect tales from Russia, Belarusia, and also Ukraine and other places as well. But he put them under the Russian Empire. So then they, claiming that these were Russian, but they
Yeah.
exist all over in all of the countries. So when she really was around, I mean, like she was around for me, but I wasn't particularly disinterested in her or interested in her. She was just sort of there
Mm.
as a spirit. But when I went into menopause, I kind of like walked into this room and like, well, where are my role models and archetypes and all of that? And going into your cronehood, you're like, well, is it Betty White? Is that my is that my role model? Is it, Maxine Waters? Who's my role model, right?
Yeah.
So, but then she came really forward and I really
Mm.
connected with her as this, she's unapologetic,
Mm.
powerful, and ambiguous. So if we look at the stories of like the oldest stories that she's in, she's ambiguous. She can go either way. She can go
Hmm.
bad, she can reward you. And oftentimes she'll do that. So the bad kid she'll punish and the good kid she'll reward. She'll do a lot of that,
Hmm.
or she'll give help to things. But she's always this kind of very self-possessed
Mm.
um and dominant figure in
Yeah.
those stories. Um, it's when we get into the later stories post the introduction of Christianity that we start to see things like,
Mm,
oh, well, she's a ogre that just eats kids, then that
of
it's
course.
dimensional, and it's also how to vilify powerful old women, right? Right.
Yeah.
How you do it. So she really came forward, and I find that there are women that are younger that aren't in menopause that connect with her and identify with her. And I'm like, oh, this is exciting, because actually when you go through menopause, you're really now kind of like laying out a red carpet for yourself. Like you're going to have this amazing experience of going into
Yeah.
Crohn, because you've got this great role model. I just kind of, feel like this happens actually when for some, not for everybody, but I feel like I got to a place after menopause where I'm like, I DGAF. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll just do whatever I want. I'll show up with no makeup. I'll show up in
Yes.
overalls. I'll show up,
I love it.
like whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm just more authentically, unapologetically myself, which I find is a story that happens to a lot of women. We stop pleasing everybody else and start pleasing ourselves,
Yes.
you know.
Yes, I love that. And she definitely seems to have that embodiment. And that's why I appreciate the crone as an archetype overall, is because of that. It's unapologetic. It's like, yeah, this is me.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. We stop being, I mean, as women and girls, we're so taught to make everybody else feel comfortable, and sometimes at
Yes.
the cost of making ourselves feel comfortable. Our
Minimizing
bodies.
ourselves
Yeah.
for other people. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then when you just show up and you're you, and you're like,
Mhm.
take me or leave me, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It's
don't care anymore. Like,
exactly. It's very empowering.
yes.
So seeing younger women identify or connect to her is very, I think is a wonderful thing, because now you have something to look forward to, I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Age no longer like because a lot of like people who are femme are taught, that age is bad, it's scary, and you get quote unquote ugly, which I think is the stupidest. Anyways,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Right.
like to get to that point where you're able to shift into, you know what, I'm happy. That's all that should matter. Who cares what the society thinks that it should be like, what
Hmm.
aging should be like? This is, it's stepping into full power, as like you're saying, no longer minimizing ourselves. So
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And then before we wrap up, I do have to bring up your latest book, The Witch's Guide to Animal Familiars: Spells, Rituals, and Recipes for Making Magic with Animal Allies. It sounds absolutely magical. And as someone who is an animal communicator with a familiar, I would absolutely love to know what inspired you to write on this topic.
Well, I have always had a connection to plants and animals, and I always feel like there's deeper there's deeper places that you can go, which is such a beautiful thing. When I write a book because there's no book out there that exists that satisfies me or something,
Yes.
So obviously, when I wrote Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, is because nobody's writing about Slavic magic, nobody's writing about Ukrainian magic. Book of Candle Magic, I felt like candle magic books were kind of like recipe books, but nobody was teaching you how to be a chef. I wanted to teach you how
Yeah.
to be a candle
Oh, I
magic
love
chef,
that.
right? So you can
Yes.
just pull what you have or create your own invention. You'll get the guidelines to show you how to do that. And the book, my Magical Tarot, which is my tarot book, was written because people would say very fatalistic things about the cards, like back in those days when I read
Mhm.
it, like, oh, if you get the tower, it means this shocking thing's going to happen and it's destruction and this and that. That's great, but like, what do you do with that information? So this book was like,
Yes.
how do we work with the energy of the cards? So if you get this 3 of Swords or 10 of Swords, or what do you do with that? Not just, oh, I'm going to suffer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the same thing is true with the Witch's Guide to Animal Familiars, because I felt like people were talking about familiars from the position of uh the Hammer of the Witches. The Hammer of the Witches was a book that was written in Europe in the
Mhm.
1400s, by a guy who was a perv, really a perv. He got
Yep.
kicked out. He was a monk and he got kicked out because he was so weird and pervy. And he would get women up on the stand and ask them about all their sexual activity, because
Yeah.
to him, he got off on it, right? So
Yeah.
he made women into these evil, satanic, da, da, da. And as a side note, that set off this idea, in particular in England and in Western Europe, where there was animals that were assisting the witch.
Yeah.
And that what that really is about, what that really is saying is, so anybody who had a close, kind, caring relationship with an animal, who didn't take the biblical view that an animal is meant to be subjugated and serve it in servitude to you,
Yep.
was considered to be evil and wrong and bad and a witch. And I'm
Hmm.
like, what those people, women and men, were practicing in that kind and compassionate, connected way is what our ancient ancestors were practicing. You did not exist in the world as an authority, but you
Yes.
cooperated with nature. You
Yes.
observed where the birds were flying. You saw when the plants were sprouting. You saw and observed these things, and you worked in cooperation with these things. The very
Yes.
first, of course, being when wolves became domesticated dogs,
Yes.
right? So there was a
Absolutely.
cooperative element with an ancient people
Mm.
pre-Christianity. When the monotheistic religions come in, then we start to see this: animals are to be subjugated and animals are less
Yep.
than. So I felt like every book out there is talking about animal familiars like they are your little servants that are supposed to go out and
Hmm.
doing your dirty work for you. And I go, that is not what a familiar relationship is. So I felt like I had to get up on my soapbox and
Yes.
tell people, look, don't get weirded out by this weird dude's idea of what a familiar is. When we
Yeah.
look at the animal human relationship and how it relates to witchcraft or non-witches, really,
Hmm.
you don't have to be a witch to have a close connection to animals,
Yes.
and how they choose, and we are equals, and they cooperate with us and lend us their
Yes.
energy, and we lend them our energy. That is what that relationship is about. So there are many beautiful, playful, fun, gorgeous ways that you can connect. And I go into general ways, and then I get into like very specifics for specific animals. I go into history. I go into like ways that work with the nature of that animal and what energy they bring to you. So everything from wild animals to farm animals to pets and domesticated animals. So I have some people say, well, I can't have a familiar because I live in an apartment and they don't allow pets. I go, it doesn't have to be a pet.
Yeah.
It can be an animal out in the wild that you
Yeah.
have that one moment where you and the owl are locking eyes for just a moment, and then the owl flies off. But that one moment could be so incredibly energy filled and powerful.
Yes.
So it is really about how to respectfully make magic with the beings that we share the world with. And those
Yes.
animals have so much to teach us, so much beautiful energy and love to share with us, right? And it's something very, very special. So
Absolutely. I 1,000% agree with everything that you're saying, like from the history of it and this explanation as to how we went from living in tandem, in unison with nature, with animals, and then suddenly we're like, no, we're better than that. And it's like, no, no. And, when I do pet communication, it's great because I'm finally able to start seeing people see their pets not as like this separate thing that's meant to entertain them, but as a cherished loved one, like like a child. Like I mean, fur
yeah.
babies are so popular now, right? And I see that so often with my pet communication sessions where people are starting to see their pets or the animals that they tend to or take care of, even like people who are like, oh yeah, this isn't my dog, it's just a dog I'm like walking and I'm fostering or I'm helping because I care about animals and I want to make sure they're being taken care of, that people's love and care for animals is growing. And it's so wonderful to see. And, my hope is kind of like what you're talking about, that we can reintegrate that, not just with our pets, not with just with the animals that we call our fur babies, but even the squirrel outside who comes to my window and asks for peanuts, the blue jay
Mm-hmm.
who squawks at me saying like, hey, where's the bird feeder,
Mm-hmm.
it can expand beyond our home and we can have that in unison understanding. And, um, in regards to like even what I do, people assume like, oh, you're a pet communicator. And I'm like, no, 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 animal communicator. We can go beyond just the small nucleus of our family, you know? And even when people come and get sessions with me, they're always so surprised to find out that they're already connected and communicating with their animals and they just don't realize it. And it's the same thing with nature. People don't even realize that they are in tune with their surroundings in a much deeper way. And if it's their fur baby that can help bring that awareness in so they can start, incorporating it, whether you consider yourself magical or mundane, like being able to connect in with nature is so important, especially with where we are right now with a lot of things, you know?
Absolutely. It's so healing. Nature heals.
Yes.
Nature heals, and spending time with animals, with nature, with plants, with trees, the air, the ocean,
Hmm.
all of it is is
Yes.
is really something that can heal the soul when you're sad, when you're
Yes.
scared, it's such a good thing. Yeah,
It
absolutely.
absolutely is. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I go outside and I touch my lemon tree and I'm like, help me get grounded. When I need to clear my head, I go for a walk and I ask for the wind to like blow through my hair so I can get a clearer mind. So I, for anyone who's listening, just because I'm so excited to talk to you about this, but definitely try this out. Like connect in with your beloved pets as well as, nature around you. It can
Hmm.
be really rejuvenating. And I think we really need that connection and rejuvenation at this time.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so, so very much for sharing your wonderful story of who you are, how you got to where you are now, your deep beliefs and traditions and experiences in life. It's been so enlightening for me, and I'm sure the listeners are going to want to know where they can connect with you even more. I know you mentioned it at the beginning, but definitely, what do you have coming up? Where can people find you?
Well, I'm very excited about this coming year, 2026. We've got some amazing workshops coming up. One of which I haven't even talked about. We're just planning, obviously we're in the past when
Yeah.
we're recording this. We're just planning the 2026 year. And we're going to be working with the new moons. We're going to be working with different Slavic deities on each new moon. And the new moons will have a candle dedicated to that deity and energies that we'll be working with, and also a little workshop ahead of, if you take the spell kit and workshop for the new moon, you'll get a little 30-minute workshop about the deities. So you can learn about the deities that you're working with for the new moon.
Oh, how cool.
Um, for our full moon, we're going to be doing a 13 lunation 1 year, but 13 lunation cycle for shamanic witchcraft. So it starts in January and it's going to be once a month on around the full moon, usually on the full moon or the day before, where we'll be taking you through the journey of shamanic learning so that you can learn to heal, that you can learn to connect with the lower and the middle and upper worlds,
Mm.
do healing, as I said before, go on vision journeys, do shamanic divination. So that's going to be our full moon workshop. And then I have our Slavic Sundays witchcraft workshops, which are going to be about different life cycle and cycle of the year traditions throughout the year.
Mm.
So we're going to be looking at seasonal holidays and then life rituals around birth and courtship and marriage and funeral, traditions, all based on these ancient pre-Christian, pagan, and animist beliefs, ancient beliefs. So yeah, it'll be
That
fun.
sounds amazing. And they can
So
find that on your website?
yes, so the best thing to do
Beautiful.
is, I got a little gift for everyone. If you go to spellsquad.com, spell squad is my big inner circle. If you go there, spellsquad.com, it'll take you to the page on the site where you can sign up for my email list. And if you do sign up for the email list, you'll get a 33-page ebook called 7 Secrets to Supercharge Your Spell Work, which is good for beginners, intermediate, and advanced work. Like I have mastery work in there, but also entry level work in there. Like, how do I work with an oil, or how do I work
Mm.
with a candle? So it's this wonderful book to get you started on a path of practical magic. and that's free when they sign up. I've also got 13 pages for your the printable pages for your Book of Shadows that have correspondences that are super helpful in your magic. They'll also get a link to join me on Sundays, which every Sunday, except for the first Sunday of the month, I have a 1 hour, absolutely free 1 hour session.
Oh,
Takes
cool.
place at 5 p.m. Pacific, where you can join me. It's called the free live magic Q&A tea party. It's got a really long free. It's live. We're talking about magic and you can ask questions. So how do I get that all into 2 words? I can't. So the Q&A tea party, you can come join us if you have questions about like, how do I do, what kind of spell is good for this? Or what do I do with this ritual tool? Or how do I do this? You can ask those questions. It's a webinar format. You aren't on camera. Your voice isn't being heard. You can just come and listen. A lot of people just come and listen. Or you can type in your question and I'll answer your questions, and it's absolutely free. It doesn't cost anything. So we've got lots and lots and lots going on. And if you sign up on the email list, you'll get all of those goodies, plus a coupon for the shop if you want to do some shopping as well. So just something for you all.
Amazing. Definitely, listeners, check out Madame Pamita's stuff because you are an absolute resource and wealth of knowledge. And I highly recommend people listening go check it out and sign up and see what it's all about. Well, thank you so very much again for being here today. It's been such a pleasure connecting in with you.
Well, thanks, Fantasma Witch. I'm so glad we had a conversation. It was just really wonderful to be here with you and talking about all this wonderful stuff that we love so much.
Yes. Thank you again. Thank you so much for joining me in the parlor for this episode. If you want more psychic magical tips, make sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Fantasma Witch. FANTASMAWITCH. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon, where I have a Discord community. I do Q&As, live classes, workshops, and more. To book a reading or consultation directly with me, you can go to my website, www.phantasmawitch.com. All of these links can be found in the episode description. And please, if you enjoyed this show, make sure you go leave a rating, leave a review, share it with others. It really helps the show to reach new listeners if you take a moment to do that, and it is sincerely appreciated. Shout out to the artist Cat Lines, who helped me to redesign the podcast logo to the beautiful magical teacup you see today. See you, mystical friends, in the parlor next time.